it can be just a cruel place, and so you have to know how to really stick up for yourself. You know, you're a little kid. You don't have any adults to protect you.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we'll be counting down our picks for the most shocking, headline-grabbing controversies involving religious leaders and institutions.
It would have been kinder for these men to assassinate us than to do what they've done to us.
Number 30, Ravi Zacharias, posthumous accusations.
If I am creating misery for people around me, and I'm roughing people's lives up, you know what that tells people? I am the one who's messed up inside. It tells me more about myself than about that person.
It wasn't until the death of Christian author and minister Ravi Zacharias in 2020 that the true scope of his sexual assault allegations were revealed. This was in addition to the accusations that Zacharias falsified his educational background in his biography. Multiple women claimed the evangelical minister assaulted them while they worked at the Ravi Zacharias International Ministries. Other female employees at his chain of day spas also accused him of sexual harassment. Their statements included allegations that Zacharias routinely demanded sex from these employees. One accuser even claimed the spa owner pleasured himself in front of her an astonishing 50 times.
The vitriol, the invective, the poisonous barbs and statements, we can't seem to disagree without bringing the person down.
Number 29, Pastor Carl Lentz sexual misconduct allegations.
He said, among you there must not even be a hint of sexual immorality or any kind of impurity or any kind of greed, because these are improper for God's holy people.
The very phrase celebrity pastor seems oxymoronic, like a pitch for a bad and tasteless reality show. Yet that's exactly the professional space Carl Lentz occupied during his tenure as a spiritual advisor to entertainers like Justin Bieber. His time in that position didn't last forever, though, and not because Lentz carried himself with a similar sort of rock star swagger.
I had deep brokenness that manifests itself in a lot of different ways.
Do you want to change?
I'm changing.
Instead, Lentz was relieved of his membership to Australia's Hillsong Church after it was revealed he'd been unfaithful to his wife. Additionally, his former nanny, Leona Kimes, who was also a wife to another Hillsong pastor, accused Lentz of manipulation and sexual assault during their affair.
I just broke down. It felt like just wave after wave, just being hit.
Number 28, Paul Barnes is outed. The scandal at the center of Paul Barnes' ministry isn't so much connected to the pastor's identity as a gay man, but rather the reaction to him coming out. The founder of Colorado's Grace Chapel Church was outed by an anonymous caller to his parish, and the revelation ultimately resulted in him resigning from his position. In a subsequent statement, Barnes stated that he struggled with his sexuality and spent nights, quote, begging God to take this away. The question can then be asked, will there be a point when religious institutions accept a broader definition of sexuality, or will certain demographics continue to be ousted from their ranks as a result?
So would you please come? Would you check out our church? And if we're not the right church for you, we'll help you find the right church. But I think you're going to find in us biblical convictions that lead us to be the church God wants us to be.
Number 27, Lonnie Latham solicitation scandal. This is another situation with differing viewpoints and reactions, especially with the benefit of hindsight. The Reverend Dr. Lonnie Latham was an influential and active minister within the South Tulsa Baptist Church, a man with opinions about faith, sexuality, and law. Yet Latham was arrested in 2006 for sexual solicitation of an undercover male police officer. The resulting scandal led to the pastor's resignation from the church. Latham was eventually acquitted of the criminal charges, but various LGBTQIA+ groups pointed out the hypocrisy of him previously defaming gay causes. They argued that if Latham had been free to embrace his true identity while serving his congregation, he might never have resorted to such behavior. Number 26, Coy Privette arrest and resignation.
Privette was brought to the magistrate's office in Salisbury this morning, charged and released on a written promise to appear in court.
After his arrest in 2007, critics were quick to point out the hypocrisy of North Carolina lawmaker Coy Privette, who was a staunch opponent of alcohol sales and legalized lotteries. Pivett had been picked up for soliciting a sex worker, a case which was discovered by chance while police were investigating a different crime. In addition to being a conservative politician, Privette was also a retired Baptist pastor and the president of the Christian Action League of North Carolina, a position he relinquished after the charges came to light. However, he refused to resign from his role as a Caribas County commissioner, holding on to the position for another 3 years, despite calls from his Republican colleagues to step down.
Privette was the group's president the last 6 years. Before that, he served as its executive director for 15 years. Creech says he considers Privette a mentor and a friend.
Number 25, Tony Alamo and the Alamo Christian Foundation.
And there's just a set of basic rules. They're told when they come in, no drugs, no sex, no pairing off.
The life of this religious cult leader took some strange detours. Tony Alamo initially worked in the music industry as a singer and performer before eventually founding the Alamo Christian Foundation in 1969. His Jewish heritage seemed to matter little when it came to the evangelical side of preaching. Yet Alamo's foundation was criticized almost immediately for targeting youth in Hollywood for conversion.
As the high priests of voodoo and pocomania know, rhythmic shattering noise can be used to affect normal brain function and critical reaction.
This focus on having young members of his foundation cruising Hollywood for new recruits tied into Alamo's exploitation of child labor for his clothing side business. In 2009, he was ultimately convicted of charges related to his inappropriate conduct with minors and spent the rest of his life in prison.
Years after his wife's death, Tony Alamo began taking child brides as young as 8 years old. And in 2009, he was sentenced to 175 years in prison.
Number 24, Ted Haggard's sex scandal.
Well, it was a love-hate thing. I mean, it was a compulsive behavior, and once I was able to deal with that through therapy, I haven't had that compulsion since.
The St. James Church was founded in 2010 by a Free Methodist pastor named Ted Haggard. This wasn't Haggard's first venture. He had previously found great success with his New Life Church back in the 1980s. But it was the scandal associated with Haggard's former ministry that necessitated a new religious venture, one that outed his extramarital affair.
If you need to go somewhere in the middle of the night and you want to keep it a secret and hope nobody ever knows, don't go there.
The pastor admitted to a relationship with a male sex worker named Mike Jones, as well as to purchasing narcotics. This was especially significant given Haggard's vocal opposition to same-sex marriage and LGBTQIA+ causes. The minister also admitted that he behaved inappropriately with another young male member of his congregation, and he ultimately resigned from his position as chair.
Now I've lost my career, I've lost my social standing, I've lost all my positions, I've lost all my influence, I've lost my trustworthiness, I've lost all of that.
Number 23, John Polk and gay conversion therapy.
Are you straight now?
I am.
You are.
You're
not a gay person who fights with yourself every day.
No.
The fundamentalist Protestant group Focus on the Family has long advocated for conservative political causes with an emphasis on opposing LGBTQIA+ rights. They established a splinter ministry called Love One Out, led by John Polk, who claimed that counseling and prayer had changed his sexuality. However, Polk stirred controversy in 2000 when he was photographed outside a gay bar in Washington, D.C. He initially denied it was him, then claimed he only stopped to use the bathroom, before ultimately admitting he went in there to meet other patrons.
I knew this was going to come out immediately, so I lied. And I said I didn't know it was a gay bar and I had gone in there to use the bathroom. Well, any person with half a brain realized, come on, John.
Polk eventually left Love One Out, publicly denounced the organization, and apologized for his involvement. These days, he identifies as both Christian and gay, rejecting the formerly gay label he once embraced.
I had never been honest a day in my life. It was lie after lie after lie after lie.
Number 22, Terry Hornbuckle assault scandal. The Victory Temple Bible Church of Arlington, Texas only consisted of 15 members when it was founded by Pastor Terry Hornbuckle in 1986. Fast forward to 1992, and the congregation that was formerly housed within an old Dairy Queen had been rebranded as Agape Christian Fellowship and was situated in a nondescript strip mall. It was during his time overseeing this new ministry that Hornbuckle drugged and sexually assaulted 3 non-consenting women. He was found guilty in 2006 and served a full 15-year sentence. However, fearing that he would re-offend if released, authorities decided to transfer Hornbuckle to a mental health hospital after his prison term had ended. Number 21. Mother Teresa's motivations and charity scandal.
This profane marriage between tawdry media hype and medieval superstition gave birth to an icon which few have since had the poor taste to question.
To many people around the world, Mother Teresa remains an unwavering figure of selflessness and compassion. This is understandable, as the Albanian Indian nun founded the Missionaries of Charity, which for many years has provided hospice services and assistance programs for the poor and sick. But even before her death in 1997, Teresa was criticized for her motives and the quality of medical care provided.
By these canonical keywords, we are taught that we may recognize saints. Yet Mother Teresa regards herself as mandated by heaven, which is hardly modest.
Her critics cited the missionaries' practice of secretly converting dying patients to Christianity, regardless of their religious affiliations. She was also called out for reusing syringes and lacking proper medication, even though her charity was pulling in millions of dollars in donations every year. Regardless of these denunciations, Mother Teresa was canonized by the Vatican in 2016.
More than 100,000 worshippers packed into a sunny St. Peter's Square for the canonization of Mother Teresa.
Number 20. Joel Osteen and the Hurricane Harvey controversy.
The city set up a shelter about 4 miles from here that can house 10,000 people, showers, dormitories, kitchens, security, all that. They didn't need us as a shelter at that point.
Famous televangelist Joel Osteen has been the senior pastor of Lakewood Church in Houston, Texas since 1999. When Hurricane Harvey hit Texas in August 2017, Osteen drew significant criticism for only offering prayers and not opening up his megachurch to those displaced by the flood. Through their social media pages, Lakewood's administration attempted to refute those claims. They put up pictures that supposedly showed the 1,600-seat facility had also suffered considerable flooding and was therefore inaccessible. But this was quickly contradicted by posts from several Twitter users, which showed no apparent flooding around the church's premises. Following the backlash, Osteen made Lakewood available as a shelter and began accepting donations and relief items for the hurricane survivors.
You know what? We've been here 60 years helping people, and we're going to be here long after all this dies down, helping these people as well.
Number 19. Peter Popoff's clairvoyant scam.
You're going to see a miracle touch your own life as you use it. Amen. I believe the power is just going to flow to you.
The televangelist boom of the 1970s and 80s saw a number of high-profile preachers amass fame and fortune for their apparent hearing and clairvoyant powers. One of these was Peter Popoff. During his widely broadcast services, Popoff would accurately provide specific details about his audience members, as if divinely revealed to him. In 1986, James Randi, a magician and skeptic, showed that the California preacher wasn't actually hearing from God, but from his wife through an earpiece.
Popoff's wife, Elizabeth, had previously gotten personal information from people in the audience and then fed it to her husband electronically through a tiny earpiece.
At first, Popoff denied the allegations, but faced with insurmountable evidence, he later owned up to them. While his followership was significantly affected by the scandal, Popoff successfully made a comeback in the late 90s.
Can you just answer us one question?
Can you just move away, please?
Would you talk to us later, please?
No.
Number 18. Joe Barron juvenile solicitation scandal.
Joe Barron is leaving Prestonwood Baptist Church in the Dallas area after being arrested Thursday in this parking lot.
Joe Barron was a minister and marriage counselor at Prestonwood Baptist Church in the Dallas, Texas suburb of Plano. In 2008, Barron struck up an online conversation with who he thought was a teenage girl living in Bryan, Texas. After about 2 weeks, Barron drove the almost 200-mile trip to meet up with the girl, only to be arrested by law enforcement and charged with solicitation of a minor. His arrest was part of a sting operation in which police officers posed online as young children in a bid to fish out predators in the area. The Prestonwood Church quickly denounced Barron's actions and forced him to resign from his pastoral position. He was later convicted of the charges.
In his car, officers found a webcam and condoms, even though the 52-year-old allegedly told authorities he simply wanted to buy the girl a Coca-Cola.
Number 17. Carlton Pearson and the Gospel of Inclusion.
The property
my intellectual rights, the name. I had to sign off from the founder of the organization that I had founded, and it was just pretty torturous.
And lost your home?
Lost my home.
At the height of his ministry, Carlton Pearson was a prominent Pentecostal preacher whose Tulsa, Oklahoma church drew in crowds of over 6,000 people weekly. He was also a gospel singer and televangelist who got his start as a protege of the late Dr. Oral Roberts. As beloved as he was, Pearson soon lost favor with his peers and followers when he adopted a new doctrine he called the gospel of inclusion.
People have been saying that I stopped believing in hell. And I've been thinking about that, and I've been praying on it.
The doctrine rejected the idea of hell as punishment for sin and preached that everyone will ultimately be saved by God, regardless of their actions on earth. Soon after, Pearson lost a bulk of his congregation, and he was declared a heretic by the Joint College of African American Pentecostal Bishops.
The Bible can be very controversial because one day it says you love God and the mercy of God endures forever. How can mercy endure forever and hell endure forever? One would cancel out the other.
Number 16, the many scandals of Earl Paulk.
And I am so sorry for any hardship that's come in your life or your family because of me.
During the civil rights movement, Georgia minister Earl Paulk gained a reputation as one of a handful of white Southern preachers who advocated against racism and segregation. However, that reputation was soon tainted by a slew of sex scandals. Between 1992 and 2005, multiple women accused Paulk of manipulating them into having sexual relations with him.
The Brewers were pillars in Bishop Paulk's church. They filed a suit asking for unspecified money, saying Paulk sexually abused Mona for 14 years.
But the mother of all scandals came in 2007 when Donnie Earl, Paulk's nephew and a senior pastor at his church, revealed that Paulk was actually his father. Through a court-ordered paternity test, it was discovered that Paulk had had an affair with his brother's wife, resulting in the birth of Donnie Earl. He was also alleged to have molested his granddaughter. Number 15, Greater Ministries International Ponzi Scheme.
A Ponzi scheme that traded on people's faith. Take a look.
Don't put it on your tax return that you donated any money to Greater.
As the founder of the Florida-based Greater Ministries International, Gerald Payne orchestrated an elaborate scam that defrauded unsuspecting people throughout the 90s. Dubbed Faith Promises, the scheme was depicted as a divine investment program in which investors' money would be doubled by God himself. In total, about 18,000 people were swindled by Payne, his wife Betty, and other church leaders to the tune of about $500 million. The fraudulent program came to a halt in August 1999 when U.S. federal agents stormed the church's headquarters in Tampa and closed down the building. Payne and his accomplices were arrested and handed lengthy prison sentences for their crimes.
The church would guarantee a 17% return.
We don't promise you, the Lord does.
Number 14, the Book of Abraham.
I think of the process of converting a written foreign language into my own language, usually with the use of a dictionary. That doesn't seem to be what Joseph Smith is doing.
The Book of Abraham is one of the most fundamental scriptural texts of the Church of Mormon. The text originated from a collection of Egyptian scrolls that were bought and translated by the church's founder, Joseph Smith, in the 19th century. Smith claimed that the book was an autobiographical account of Abraham's early life in Egypt. But almost as soon as it was published, the book became shrouded in controversy.
Egyptologists have translated these papyrus fragments and determined that they don't directly relate to the Book of Abraham. Instead, they contain ancient Egyptian funerary texts.
With some Egyptologists criticizing Smith's translation of the original text. They also accused him of reconstructing entire parts that had been damaged. The book sparked renewed criticism in the late 1960s, when parts of the scrolls purchased by Smith were discovered and found to be entirely different from his translated text.
Abraham also shows us that our Heavenly Father loves all of his children. He wants us to know him.
Number 13, Robert Tilton's prosperity gospel scandal.
It's burning on the inside of you, and you need to make a vow of faith of $1,000. Oh, Bob, couldn't you say 25? No!
The prosperity gospel is a belief in some Christian denominations that encourage followers to make monetary donations in exchange for God's favor. This doctrine has been widely criticized by Christian and non-Christian figures, and has even resulted in multiple financial scandals. Chief among them was Robert Tilton, a Texas preacher and televangelist who urged his audience to mail in hefty sums alongside their prayer requests.
But Primetime obtained some of Tilton's financial documents. These are daily deposits, and based on these, Tilton's followers sent his ministry conservatively $80 million a year.
In 1991, an ABC News investigation into Tilton's ministry found that he only took out the cash and checks and threw away the prayer requests. Although Tilton initially denied this, he later owned up to it in a deposition. Tilton quickly lost most of his audience and eventually his TV program.
Doesn't make any difference what time of the day it is. Call us right now at right now, real quickly, at 214-620-6200.
Number 12. The Magdalene Laundries.
Last year, the United Nations Committee Against Torture issued a scathing report calling for compensation for the victims of abuse and punishment for the perpetrators.
In 2014, English actress Judi Dench received an Oscar nomination for her performance in Philomena. The film, based on true events, followed a single mother who was sent to work in a church-owned institution and forced to give her child up for adoption. Run by the Catholic Church, the real-life institutions, known as Magdalene Laundries, took in unwed mothers and other women thought to be morally wayward.
Those so-called offenses could include having a child out of wedlock. And many young women consigned to the laundries were actually victims of abuse at home.
They were then subjected to, in some cases, years of torture and unpaid labor, practices which were supported by the state and church. In 2013, the government of Ireland offered a formal apology and set up a compensatory fund for victims of the laundries. Catholic representatives, however, still refuse to acknowledge the church's part in it.
The women say the labor was relentless, injuries common.
Very heavy work. If you weren't doing the sheets quick enough, they'd come over and hit you a box into the side of the face.
Number 11. The Banco Ambrosiano scandal.
Head of Italy's largest private bank.
$1 billion in bad debts.
Connected to the mafia, the Freemasons, and the heart of the Catholic Church.
In the early 80s, a scandal broke involving the Catholic-owned Vatican Bank and another Italian bank called Banco Ambrosiano. In 1981, the chairman of Banco Ambrosiano, Roberto Calvi, was sentenced to 4 years in prison for illegal transactions he had carried out through the institution. While he was out on bail, the bank collapsed after it was discovered that it had accrued debts of over $1 billion. Calvi fled the country to England, only to be found dead, hanging from the Blackfriars Bridge in London.
Calvi wasn't just connected to the Vatican. He also had links with the mafia and Italian Freemasons. He had lots to hide and a lot of secrets to tell.
Being the main shareholder of Banco Ambrosiano, the Vatican Bank was implicated in the scandal, as it was alleged to be the medium through which a lot of money was siphoned out of the bank. Number 10. Jim and Tammy Faye Bakker's controversies.
If every person watching could double their pledge right now, that way we can save the Word of God.
Jim and Tammy Faye Bakker were a husband and wife evangelical team that gained popularity in the mid-70s with their television program, The PTL Club. The Bakkers enjoyed great success with the show, at one point raking in revenues of around $120 million annually. This all came crumbling down after it was revealed that $287,000 in hush money was paid to Jessica Hahn, a church secretary who accused Bakker of assaulting her years ago. Things took a turn for the worse when Jim was charged with defrauding his members of millions of dollars for memberships at Heritage USA, their religious theme park. He was sentenced to 45 years in prison, of which he served only 5.
I did not handle my checkbook. I did not handle even my own finances. I was busy doing these things, and I neglected that.
Number 9. Residential schools in Canada.
More than 150,000 children were sent to residential schools, which Canada's first Prime Minister supported to, in his words, sever children from the tribe and civilize them.
The troubling legacies of governmental policies, like the Japanese internment camps of World War II, looms large over Canada's system of residential schools. These state-sponsored institutions possessed ties to religious organizations and were intended to forcibly assimilate Indigenous children. The schools shockingly operated into the late 90s, with the last of its kind, Catholic Hall, only shutting its doors in 1997.
The family and personal lives of Indigenous people were so disrupted for so long that there is just this tremendous impact on the lives of people that continues right to this day.
The residential school system today has been acknowledged by the Canadian government as genocide, thanks to their forced removal of children, widespread abuse, and the damage done to Indigenous cultural heritage. A 2021 investigation even turned up the existence of unmarked graves, offering yet another black eye to this shameful period in Canadian history.
It has to be looked at. It has to be investigated. The boys didn't die in the bush. They died under custody.
Number 8. Gilbert Deya abduction and trafficking scandal.
Mary Deya at the time claiming the husband Gilbert Deya had powers to deliver miracles. The husband had run a church ministry in Nairobi where women unable to bear children were prayed for and in the process allegedly delivered.
After leaving his home country of Kenya in the mid-1990s, this evangelist founded the Gilbert Deya Ministries in the United Kingdom. Deya and his wife Mary claimed to be able to grant infertile women miracle babies after praying for them. These women were made to travel to Kenya where the birthing process would take place. It was, however, discovered that these miracle babies were actually stolen from maternity hospitals in Nairobi and presented to unsuspecting women. Mary was arrested in Nairobi in 2004 and later sentenced to prison for stealing 2 babies. Deya was apprehended in the UK, and after a lengthy court battle, he was extradited to Kenya, where he was tried on child trafficking charges, but was ultimately acquitted.
With Mary Deya behind bars, her husband was fighting extradition orders filed before a Nairobi court. A court in London ruled that Deya could not get a fair trial in Kenya.
Number 7. Matsitsa Bappe scandal.
But in some ultra-Orthodox communities, religious leaders known as Mohels also engage in something controversial during the bris.
The practice of male circumcision is an ancient rite in Jewish faith, dating back to the religion's foundation. In certain Orthodox communities, after taking off the foreskin, the Mohel, or circumciser, sucks off the blood with his mouth before bandaging the area.
People should just kind of be aware that there's, health issues that are involved, and you should really kind of check to make sure that the person who's doing it is healthy.
This procedure, known as Matsitsa Bappe, came under fire after a number of New York infants were diagnosed with herpes. The disease was thought to be transmitted to the children by the Mohel, reportedly leading to the deaths of 2 babies over an 11-year period. In response, the New York City Health Department passed a regulation mandating that all parents be informed of the risks and sign a consent form before proceeding with the ritual.
Were you shocked when Rabbi Fisher told you that?
Shocked is an understatement. It's unbelievable that this goes on, and this man is maiming and killing children.
Number 6. Creflo Dollar, Gulfstream jet, and domestic violence scandals.
In which way is this jet important for your ministry?
Well, in order for me to do what I've been called to do, the airlines, they don't fly my schedule.
Known for his extravagant suits, luxury cars, and lavish homes, Creflo Dollar really goes out of his way to embody his last name. The Atlanta-based televangelist has caused quite a stir for his acceptance and preaching of the prosperity gospel.
The outreach ministry of World Changers Church is not what draws the criticism. It is Creflo Dollar's beliefs about prosperity.
In 2015, Dollar was heavily criticized for soliciting donations to buy a luxury $60 million Gulfstream private jet. According to him, the plane was necessary to spread the gospel worldwide. Prior to that, in 2012, Dollar was accused of getting physical with his teenage daughter. He was arrested and charged with battery, but the charges were later dropped after he completed a mandatory anger management course.
Anything you want to say to your congregation?
No, sir.
Number 5. Mount Cashel orphanage scandal.
For more than 4 decades, physical and sexual abuse at Newfoundland's Mount Cashel orphanage was suppressed by a code of silence.
The Mount Cashel Orphanage was a facility in St. John's, Newfoundland, Canada that housed boys from the 1950s until it was shut down in 1990. The orphanage was run by the Congregation of Christian Brothers, some of whose members molested the young residents. In total, over 300 boys were reported to have been victims of the crime, making it the largest assault scandal in Canadian history. Even worse, it was reported that religious and local authorities were well aware of the incidents but turned a blind eye to them. Multiple civil lawsuits have since been filed by the Mount Cashel survivors, leading to millions of dollars in compensation being paid by the government of Newfoundland and the Congregation of Christian Brothers.
From the time I walked in until that service was over, I just kept looking at that priest and those altar boys and wondering.
Number 4. The allegations against Bishop Eddie Long.
The well-known sex scandal involving Bishop Eddie Long began when 4 young men, all former members of the New Birth Missionary Baptist Church, filed suit accusing the bishop of lavishing money, trips, and gifts on the young adults.
Bishop Eddie Long was a senior pastor of New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in DeKalb County, Georgia, when he was embroiled in controversy in 2010. That year, 4 young male members of Long's church came forward with allegations that he had forced them into improper sexual relationships a couple of years prior. Long, who was staunchly against gay marriage, vehemently denied the claims, saying that he was under attack by his accusers and that he was going to fight. But that fight only manifested behind closed doors, as the lawsuits filed by the 4 men were settled out of court for undisclosed sums. A 5th accuser came forward and also received an unspecified settlement from Long.
Eventually, it turned into such a relationship that the bishop had a ceremony with Anthony Flagg called a covenant. Within that covenant, it was essentially a marriage ceremony.
Number 3. Jimmy Swaggart solicitation scandal.
You see this right here? This is the Bible. Right. That's what I go by.
Where'd it come from?
That's what I live by.
Who brought it down?
Not the Catholics.
Jimmy Swaggart was once a pastor at the Assemblies of God Pentecostal Church and one of the leading televangelists in the U.S. His weekly programs were so popular that they were broadcast to over 3,000 stations around the world. But what he is probably most renowned for was the scandal he was accused of in 1988. After being photographed leaving a motel room with a sex worker, Swaggart was stripped of his ministerial license, and his TV shows were briefly taken off the air. All of this built up to Swaggart's infamous "I have sinned" speech, in which he tearfully confessed to his congregation on live TV.
I have sinned against you, my Lord.
The Louisiana preacher went on to establish his own independent ministry. Number 2. Vatican Leaks scandal.
It was a cloak and dagger operation with meetings between Nutzi and the butler in public squares, conversations only by public telephones.
In 2012, a series of confidential Catholic Church documents were released to the public in what became known as the Vatican Leaks scandal. It all began with the publication of a letter written by the then Secretary of the Vatican Finance and Management Committee, alleging misappropriation of funds within the committee.
That, they believe, proves he is the source of a flood of leaks to Italian newspapers that have embarrassed the Pope and exposed a poisonous atmosphere behind the ancient walls of the Vatican.
Things worsened when Italian journalist Gianluigi Nuzzi released a book containing more confidential letters from Pope Benedict XVI's desk. These letters exposed alleged financial corruption and abuse of power within the Vatican. The final nail in the coffin was an internal investigation that revealed the blackmail of gay clergymen by church outsiders. Pope Benedict ultimately resigned from his position in 2013, the first papal resignation in 700 years.
But the Vatican's police eventually figured out the butler did it. He was charged with stealing documents and sentenced to 18 months in Vatican custody.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into Settings and switch on your notifications. Number 1. The Catholic Archdiocese of Boston Spotlight Scandal.
We thought, okay, we've heard there may be 6 or 7, and then suddenly we thought, could there be a dozen? And then we seemed to have 20. And by the time we were confident publishing our first story about the scale of the problem, we said there were at least 70. We now know there were hundreds in the Boston Archdiocese alone.
In the early 2000s, the Boston Globe published a series of articles that revealed accusations of assault by multiple individuals against Catholic priests in the Archdiocese of Boston. These articles, which initially focused on cases within the Boston area, soon gave way to a global investigation into the conduct of priests and the leaders of the church.
You know, one of the traditions of any reporting team is to confront that person whose name is going to be on the front page with allegations of wrongdoing before it's in the paper.
In total, more than 1,000 cases were uncovered, with some dating back several decades. Major criticism was directed at the church leaders who covered up these cases by transferring accused priests to other parishes. The exceptional investigation by the Boston Globe team was dramatized in the 2015 Academy Award-winning film Spotlight.
We're not going away.
We're going to tell this story. We're going to tell it right. We just need a little more time. That's all we're asking for.
Why bother asking?
Should religious leaders be held to different moral standards than their respective flocks? Let us know what you think, respectfully, in the comments.
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.